oh yeah, the rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of my life, oh yeah, the rhythm of my life, 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 life.
So here we are, the moment we have all been waiting for. You know, millennials love the 80s. A lot of millennial media or sensual media reminisce into the 80s, while Gen Z really likes their 90s nostalgia. They like the cheesy TV, they like the different types of, you know, aesthetics, especially internet aesthetics, the Y2K. This was the decade, I would say, that a lot of change has happened. So this is when queer cinema said enough, right? We are done hiding, right? But before we kind of get into the 90s, let's kind of just reminisce a little bit even further into the 80s and just do a little bit of a rewind of what we dove into the last era video, which was literally forever ago. Sorry, y'all. I promise I'm gonna get better, but you know what? Hey, we got production now, you know what I mean? I'm a VTuber, right? It's good now, right? Kind of. But let's kind of just dive into the 80s and what has happened into the 80s. So in the 1980s, the AIDS crisis devastated the entire LGBT community. And, you know, Reagan didn't really give two shits about it. Reagan did not give two shits. George H.W. Bush, the dad, also offered little to no assistance to the, you know, queer community for, you know, for any kind of aid for AIDS. Right? Especially during his time in office. You know, so, I mean, nobody really liked gay people or queer people in general. It was even written into law, you know, you can marry, especially within media. If we look back into the further, you know, we already know that queer representation was just not allowed on film, especially in major films that were distributed. And, you know, Rock Hudson was Hollywood's heartthrob, right, of the like 50s and 60s, right? And remind you, the 50s and 60s, you know, that was, you know, the time where, you know, the female or the woman would be at home, you know, and she would cook and clean and take care of the kids. And that's, you know, a lot of what, you know, when Republicans, or especially when, you know, Republicans talk about make America great again, this is the era, wasn't really that great for a lot of people besides middle class white America, as we know. But Rock Hudson, remember that he was not necessarily outed, but he eventually had to come out and say that he had AIDS. Now, this was devastating. This sent shockwaves through America, through media, through the newspaper. And, you know, Rock Hudson had a romantic scene in the TV show Dynasty. And he had a kissing scene. And mind you, people did not know how AIDS was spread. They did not know. People thought that you could get AIDS just by simply touching somebody. They did not know. Nobody knew. You know, the whole entire wearing the gloves thing, the whole entire when Princess Diana refused to wear the gloves, and, you know, she was like, I believe in the sciences. This is not how it's spread. You know, like, people didn't know how AIDS was spread. So the kissing scene, you know, devastated everybody, right? And this was as devastating as, let's say, today's day and age, like, you know, everyone's, you know, like, dad cinema, like, the father of cinema, not father of cinema, but, you know, Daddy Pedro Pascal. Imagine if Pedro Pascal said, like, I have AIDS, I'm dying, and I'm gonna die, and I only have a few months to live. Like, that would be devastating for a lot of people, you know what I mean? Like, especially the gays right now, you know? But Rock Hudson was that in the 50s and 60s, right? So, mind you, as queer people are not allowed on film, but regardless, we have made our own film. We have pushed and strided to give as much representation to we can of ourselves in mainstream media. And one of the things, even though queer representation was not was not going to be shown on film, we definitely had our theater. Queer theater was alive and kicking as always. If you did not... Why does it keep winking? I'm trying to close my eye. My eyes are closed. I don't know. It keeps winking, and I don't know how to unwink the wink. I don't know. Anyways, so queer theater was alive and kicking, right? Alan Bones' 1988 play Beirut, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, Beirut, written just before his death from AIDS, right? So imagine a dystopian US where the infected were quarantined, and it was adapted into HBO's Daybreak 1993, starring Cuba Gooding Jr. and Moira Kelly. Additionally, networks like HBO wanted to push education, right? Because HBO was all about education, was about education, was about educating the people. And, you know, they, since Reagan didn't do shit and, you know, George W. Bush didn't do shit, you know, people were like, let's take it amongst ourselves and educate the peeps, you know? So networks like HBO aired life stories, you know, families in crisis. It was an after-school special dramatizing, you know, real-life teen struggles. There were several episodes, or a couple episodes, focused on HIV and AIDS and queer issues, including one about a lesbian couple who wanted to, you know, go to prom. And then there was another one about a girl and somebody getting AIDS through a blood transfusion, or another one about STIs. So, you know, they were all about, you know, making content to educate the people, right? In 1993, HBO additionally, there's more on HBO, they adapted Randy Schilt's landmark 1987 book And the Band Played On into a film. It chronicled the early days of AIDS and the government's indifference, meaning, you know, fucking Reagan not giving two shits about anything. And it also featured a star-studded cast and an activist-friendly cast, including Ian McKellen and B.D. Wong. And films weren't the only ones speaking out, right? Queer films or queer theater, right? And plays, right? It wasn't the only thing trying to educate people, because eventually in the 90s, right? We're now going into the 90s a little bit more. We're diving into the 90s. Eventually, the talk about safe sex has reached mainstream media to the point in 1993, Jason Goes to Hell included a condom scene. That's something the director proudly mentions in the Crystal Lake Memoirs documentary.
And when the killer steps on that condom wrapper, on that unused condom, the audience went out of their minds every screening.
And also in 1997, later on in the 90s, Booty Call, Jamie Foxx and Vivica A. Fox centered an entire comedy around protection and consent. These works help frame the 1990s as a decade not just of grief, but of reckoning, education, and cultural revolution, right? So this is where we're at in the 90s, and, you know, the education, you know, the reason why, you know, movies started to talk about safe sex or include a sex scene, maybe with a condom or something, you know, it was because in retaliation that the government was just not responding to the people. This was the response. We are going to educate our own people since you're not going to do it, right? So this is where we're at, painting the picture here, right? So as we get into the 90s, now we're getting into the 90s. Now we're into the 90s. Now we are here, 90s. You know, we see the major rise of queer films, directors, producers, so much so that the movement or moment, right, was coined as New Queer Cinema. However, as visibility grew, so did the backlash. Homophobia was still loud. Mind you, homophobia has always been loud. Homophobia will forever be loud until people educate themselves. Correct? Correct. And I'm not talking about indifference. Indifference is not good. I'm talking about education, sympathy, empathy. Learn how to practice it, okay? A lot of people miss that shit, and that's how people become fucking mass shooters. I'm sorry, we're going into a whole entire different fucking conversation that we shouldn't, not to say that we shouldn't be getting into, but this is how it happens. This is what it is. This is literally what we're talking about. Is to better ourselves, right? As people, as individuals. And of course, you know, the queerness, the gayness, people don't like it. They, you know, depends on what they like. Either it's they, you know, it depends on the queerness, right? Sometimes the only queerness that people like or it's very cherry picking, you know, for example, like Rocky Horror Picture Show. Although very, very queer, it is very cherry picked. Do we understand? Okay? It's cherry picked, so a lot of straight people find a lot of expressing their queerness through Rocky Horror Picture Show, especially through their midnight screenings. Remember that, right? A lot of straight couples have done it, that they would want to wear, you know, become a transvestite and, you know, be, you know, Dr. Frankenfurter, right? It's just, if you talk to somebody who grew up in this era and they're straight with kids, trust me, they dressed up as fucking as Dr. Frankenfurter because they wanted to feel their oats. Correct? Come on now. Alright, so the term new queer cinema was coined by film critic B. Ruby Rich in her 1992 Sight and Sound article, referencing a surge of radical queer independent films premiering at festivals like Sundance. These weren't just films, they were manifestos, right? And also I was born in 1992. So why new queer cinema, right? So because there was and is an old queer cinema, right? And those were the videos on my channel, the other videos that we talk about. This is where it's leading up to. All those videos from the 80s down to the 30s, or from the 30s to the 80s, those videos was acknowledging that there was an old queer cinema, right? And now we're here with the new queer cinema. This is where it is. And why is it new? This is where we're at. This is the push. This is the limit. We have exploded. The volcano is at its peak, right? So the label acknowledged, you know, history, lineage, evolution, right? These films weren't emerging from nowhere, right? No one was just like, oh, well, you know, there's gay films now. But there's always been gay films. There's always, forever, there's always been gay films. There's always been some type of queer representation, some type of homoeroticism on film, right? It's some type of queer theme. It's always been there, and sometimes people are a little bit too blind or don't want to acknowledge it because, you know, they probably like their label of being Republican or being, you know, correct all the time or whatever, right? I don't know, right? I just work here. Oh, sorry. So we had famous directors like Gus Van Sant, who was already known for Mala Noche, which was an entire black and white film about, you know, a Mexican immigrant and then a white guy trying to get to know each other and exploring sexuality, and the entire film was in black and white. And, you know, if you like those not raunchy, I don't want to say raunchy. Would I say rusty? Not rusty either. It's just, it's very stylized. If you like a stylized film and you just want something, but just mind you, it is black and white, and, you know, a lot of times people don't like their black and white films but it is black and white for a reason, okay? And also, Gus Van Sant, you know, made My Own Private Idaho with fucking Keanu Reeves, like heartthrob Keanu Reeves, like young Keanu Reeves, like not baby, but like heartthrob, like I don't know, like what? You know, it was a moment in time, right? And then Todd Haynes' Poison, which was produced by Christine Vachon, or Vachon, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. Vachon, Spanish-English alphabet, sorry about that. But it also won Sundance's Grand Jury Prize in 1991. And, you know, people were kind of like not always talking about, but people were talking about the spitting scene. There's a spitting scene in Poison, and it's, you know, kind of erotic, but it's kind of weird, but it also pays, you know, homage to the avant-garde films of, you know, of before, you know what I mean? The avant-garde films of Kenneth Anger, you know what I mean? That's what it was. I'm assuming, right? Because I didn't, you know, paying homage to the avant-garde films of that time, right? So Vachon will also go on and produce another film in the late 90s, right? In 1999, she also produced Boys Don't Cry. So that was her key to going into mainstream media, right? Which was Poison, right? You know, imagine how that happened, right? So producing a film with a gay spinning scene, then producing one of, like, you know, an Oscar-worthy, you know, an Oscar-winning film, right? Boys Don't Cry with Kimberly Pierce and Hilary Swank. Hilary Swank plays a trans man known as Brandon Tina. And, you know, that was when Hilary Swank won her Oscar. That was the Oscar, right? And that, I would say, is the first drop of, you know, of straight people wanting their gay roles for their Oscar speech. This kind of goes a little bit into, we'll go into Brokeback Mountain a little bit in, you know, the 2000s, you know, because that you know, we're not going to talk about Brokeback Mountain, but straight actors playing gay guys, and everyone talks about Brokeback Mountain and how iconic it is, right? So, you know, that's just a little tidbit, right, of you know, some history, right? And, you know, it's not a bad or good thing, right? It's just, I would say, a neutral thing. It's just a thing that happened. But just know that when there is a question on, like, oh, why are all these gay films coming out now? Mind you, or, you know, something that's just, something is queer and just doesn't feel right. Most of the time, a lot of those films are not made for queer individuals, correct? A lot of queer media is, if you know, you know. A lot of queer media is that. Now, queer media that is for straight people is based most on educating people or something superficial, very on the face, right? So, of course, not to say that there aren't queer films that are very superficial, but understand that there is a difference between, you know, gay films for gay people again and gay films for straight people.
Now you want to talk about reading? Let's talk about reading. What is wrong with you, Pedro? Are you going through it? You're going through some kind of psychological change in your life?
You're going through it? You're going through some kind of psychological change in your life? Some kind of psychological change in your life.
Enter 1990. Frameline Film Festival debuted Jeannie Livingston's directorial debut film, Paris is Burning, after filming for about 7 years. Now, if you don't know anything about Paris is Burning, or if you do know about Paris is Burning, you know, it's an iconic film. And if you don't know what it's about, it is an award-winning, critically acclaimed documentary that pays tribute to the vibrant subculture of New York's drag balls of the late 80s, an underground scene that famously became the inspiration of Madonna's Vogue. This is where it all began, in the community halls of Harlem, where flamboyant characters belonging to rival houses gathered to compete on a makeshift catwalks. Paris is Burning is an intimate portrait of time, a place, and a community of outsiders finding expression, strength, and pride in a world of their own creating. Well, according to this DVD cover. Also, in 1990, the 62nd Academy Award winner for documentary, Common Threads won. Common Threads Stories from the Quilt, directed by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman. In the early 1980s, a mysterious new disease suddenly started killing young gay men in American cities. It wasn't until Rock Hudson's death in 1985 that the rest of the country began to take notice. Common Threads tells a powerful story of the first decade of the AIDS epidemic in the United States. From the first ominous warning signs to the government's failure to respond, to a vibrant protest movement that was born as a result. Starting with 5 life stories chosen from the thousands memorialized in the Names Project AIDS Quilt, the Olympic athlete, the recovering drug addict, the conservative naval commander, the gay street activist, and the 11-year-old suburban boy with hemophilia. The filmmakers skillfully weave intimate memories with contemporary news footage to tell an epic and moving story of love, loss, anger, and healing. And with all this talk about AIDS, and it's still continuing, and we are still in the 90s, mind you, PrEP hasn't been invented, DoxyPep hasn't been a thing, so people are still contracting AIDS and dying of AIDS. And in 1990, famous artist Keith Haring has died of AIDS. But also in 1990, for those of you who really love dinosaurs, Michael Crichton released his book Jurassic Park, which would be made into a film later on in 1993 of the same name, Jurassic Park. Disney's Beauty and the Beast was released for the world to sing along to. This was the very first time an animated movie was nominated for Best Picture. Yes, Best Picture, not animated film. Why? Because of the cinematography in Beauty and the Beast, which there are countless video essays that specifically go into the cinematography in animation, and you know, Beauty and the Beast was, I think, a few of those, and you'll see it being talked about if you just look it up in YouTube. And of course, This couldn't have been done alone. As with many projects, it involves a team of people and animators and composers. One of those people happened to be Howard Ashman. Howard Ashman is a man millennials should really thank for giving us movies like Aladdin and The Little Mermaid. He was executive producer for Beauty and the Beast, and throughout the production of Beauty and the Beast, it became an allegory for his HIV status while working on it, right? The Beast being, you know, a thing the prince can't remove, and, you know, AIDS being that, right? So that is what it was alluring to. And of course, we know that HIV is pretty much a death sentence throughout this point. Yet he continued to write songs many people know and sing along to. Unfortunately, Howard Ashman passed away on March 14th, 1991, at the age of 40, due to HIV complications at St. Vincent's Catholic Medical Center in New York City prior to the film's completion. Beauty and the Beast was dedicated to his memory, and at the end of the film, there is a message that says, "To our friend Howard, who gave a mermaid her voice and a beast his soul, we will forever be grateful." November 7th, 1991, basketball legend Irving Magic Johnson suddenly announced his retirement at 32 years old. The reason? He was HIV positive. There was still a lot of stigmas around AIDS, and it was known to be a gay plague, and here you go, Magic Johnson here, not gay. On November 24th, 1991, the lead singer for Queen, Freddie Mercury, at 45, also dies due to AIDS complications. The ultimate dare is to tell the truth. Madonna, Truth or Dare came out in 1991. From the reigns of Japan through the threats of arrest for public indecency in Canada and a birthday tribute to her father in Detroit, this documentary follows Madonna on her 1990 Blonde Ambition concert tour. Filmed in black and white with the concept pieces of glittering MTV color, it is an intimate look at the work of the icon, from a prayer circle before each performance to bed games with the dance troupe afterwards. And now this film, of course, gave homosexuality a very casual portrayal, and people have compared it to Paris is Burning, which also came out a year before. And if we remember that Vogue was inspired by Paris is Burning. Alrighty, so enter 1992. Yours truly was born. Absolutely. Me. I was born in this amazing year. But, you know, in 1992, we also have films and more films and many things that have happened. So, Voices from the Front came out in 1992, directed by Sandra Elgier and Robin Hutt. In New York City, a distraught activist confronts the mayor with a story of a friend who languished on a cot in an emergency room hallway for 9 days, only to die 48 hours after leaving the hospital. In 1988, thousands of activists hold the Food and Drug Administration under siege, demanding speedier drug approval. In 1990, AIDS activists coverage on the National Institute of Health calling for a more equitable clinical trial system and expanded research to new drugs and treatments. Voices from the Front is the first feature-length documentary on AIDS activism in America. It makes clear the emotional and political effects of community activism using the voices of those directly engaged. It is a powerful distillation of pictures and words from events organized to change public consciousness, expose the failure of the healthcare system, and challenge government inaction and neglect concerning AIDS. The Crying Game came out, directed by Neil Jordan. Play it at your own risk. Irish Republican Army member Fergus forms an unexpected bond with Jodie, a kidnapped British soldier in his custody. Despite the warnings of fellow IRA members Jude and Maguire, Jodie makes Fergus promise he'll visit his girlfriend Dill in London, and when Fergus flees the city, he seeks her out. Hounded by his former IRA colleagues, he finds himself increasingly drawn to the enigmatic and surprising Dill. Now, in the movie, which a trans woman has a tryst with a member of the IRA during the Troubles, it's notable for including the trope of a trans woman trapping a heterosexual cisgender man, right? If you can't believe your eyes, trust your heart. Prelude to a Kiss came out in 1992, directed by Norman Renee. A couple fall in love despite the girl's pessimistic outlook. As they struggle to come to terms with their relationship, something supernatural happens that tests it. And as we recall also, queer cinema and queer themes are an extension from theater, you know? Plays. And Prelude to a Kiss is also a play that came out in 1988. Now, the supernatural thing that happens is that their souls switch bodies. And the play was an oblique reference to the AIDS crisis, right? The Living End, directed by Greg Arrakis. It is a acclaimed outlaw couple romance. Two HIV positive young men, a semi-employed film critic, and a hot hustler tear off a cross-country crime spree. This take no prisoner story of two lovers on the run is even more powerful and politically charged than ever. So, if you will, it would be more so like a gay Bonnie and Clyde. Also in 1992, Swoon, directed by Tom Kalin. Swoon gives the truest account yet of the 20th century most notorious crimes. The 1924 thrill kill murder of a 13-year-old boy in a South Side Chicago by genius college students and lovers Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb is the same story that inspired Hitchcock's Rope and May Levin's novel Maye. You know what? Again, excuse me if I'm pronouncing people's name wrong. May I? Because it has the word I in it. Anyways, May Levin's novel Compulsion. But Swoon forces its driving homoeroticism into the daylight, not to mention the Jewness of both killers and victims. Featuring legendary Ron Valteras, excuse me, with the name thing again, the prosecuting state's attorney, Swoon flexes its brainy intelligence to question the queerness of the case, and even extends the story to reveal how each of the imprisoned duo meet his eventual death. A former member of the New York ACT UP and AIDS activist collective Grand Fury, Kalin is bracingly indifferent to the tyranny of positive images, where same-sex desire is concerned, and Swoon is the defiance and the lyrical intelligence, stands peerless within the last century's queerly inclined cinema. This is also the year where B. Ruby Ridge coins the term new queer cinema in Sight and Sound, naming the bubbling movement. So we will be discussing the new queer cinema in its entirety and the Sight and Sound article later on in another video. But just so we are aware, as we have been discussing time and time again, why is it called new queer cinema? Because there is a old queer cinema. There has been old queer films. These films, you know, didn't pop out of nowhere, right? There are old queer films. And thus, why this is called new queer cinema, right? Because of, you know, the constant shadow banning, really, of queer cinematic films. Also, Aladdin dominates in the box office. Robin Williams as Genie brings warmth and humor, and behind the scenes is a longtime ally to the queer community. Williams has appeared in queer films both before and after Aladdin. Also, Whitney Houston's The Bodyguard continues to dominate. And Colorado's Second Amendment banned anti-discrimination for LGBTQ people, which was later struck down by the Supreme Court in 1996. Now enter 1993. Passion, power, revenge, all their majesty. M. Butterfly. In 1960 China, French diplomat René Guillemard falls in love with an opera singer, Song Liling. But Song is not at all who Guillemard thinks. Now, this is also an adaptation of the stage play Madame Butterfly. And it's essentially, we find out that the opera singer, the Chinese opera singer, is actually a man who is playing a woman. And they have an affair for 20 years. And what the diplomat doesn't know is that women roles in China were played by men. So do what you will with that information. So we have And the Band Played On, which, as we discussed, was made into an HBO movie, right? Inspired by Randy Schilt's bestseller, comes a powerful, enlightening, and moving chronicle of our times. In the summer of 1981, few knew of the deadly disease we now call AIDS. Follow the struggle of a handful strong-willed men and women who took on the fight to save lives. Matthew Modone stars as Dr. Don Francis, a researcher at the Center of Disease Control who seeks to uncover the cause of number of mysterious deaths. Little funding for a subject few will even discuss. Not only must he fight the disease, but the disinterested public, the government, the media, and even communities where the mysterious virus strikes hardest. But the death toll mounts. Public interest is stirred. Francis's research becomes a desperate race against time. Again, with another HBO, we already discussed life stories, families in crisis, with them trying to educate the people with their after-school specials to discuss heavy subjects, right? Also, Philadelphia, directed by Jonathan Demme, or Dem, two competing lawyers who join forces to sue a prestigious law firm for AIDS discrimination. As the unlikely friendship develop, their courage overcomes the prejudice and corruption of their powerful advisories. Hailed as a landmark film and dazzled with deep emotion and exceptional acting, Philadelphia stars Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. When Philadelphia came out, Philadelphia was planned to be released before Silence of the Lambs. However, of course, that didn't transpire, right? It was also not quote-unquote made as like an apology movie. It wasn't made as that. It was just, that's how critics received the movie as. Because Silence of the Lamb kinda had this transphobic undertone with the killer disguising himself as a woman. This led to today's day and age of people policing transgender folks into which restroom they could use because, you know, they're perverts and blah, blah, blah. Philadelphia painted the LGBT community in a much more positive light, especially when it came to Tom Hanks. Jonathan Demme is known to be a more of a humanitarian and empathetic filmmaker, correct? And wanted to make sure that people knew this is where I stand with the girls, the gays, and the days, essentially, right? This is where I stand with the gays. I stand with the gays, even though my last movie was, you know, was a, you know, a little transphobic. That was not what I was trying to do, you know. Now, if y'all forgive, you know, Jonathan Demme, that is all up to you, you know. But that is what this movie essentially was. Also, Jurassic Park was released for the first time, making dinosaurs very scary. I know a lot of us queer people, a lot of queer individuals, we love our dinosaurs, we love our velociraptors, we love the T-Rex. We literally somehow, some way have become, you know, inclined to really, really love dinosaurs, and I don't really know why. Dinosaurs and mermaids, right? So there was that. Also remember, Jason Goes to Hell was released. Now, under the Clinton administration, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was signed into law, forcing queer individuals in the military to remain silent, right? So don't ask if I'm gay, and I won't tell you if I'm gay, right? But this was essentially, you know, forcing people into the closet. Also, in 1993, Minnesota became the first state to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation. K.D. Lang, a Canadian singer, came out of the closet on the cover of The Advocate. Also, Whitney Houston is still owning the charts with the Bodyguard soundtrack. This is also the year where Prince changed his name to a symbol. You know, we could probably go a little bit more into depth about Prince's, you know, queer identity, right? But there are also plenty of video essays that y'all can watch about that. And also, you know, we also have Michael Jackson, right? And this was also the year where the sexual abuse allegations began to rise. Now, with, you know, for example, Silence of the Lambs and Michael Jackson's sexual abuse allegations, you know, it was a way to justify people's queer phobia, if you will, queer phobia, right? To discriminate against queer people and, you know, call them pedophiles, and you know, that shit is not cool, right? So this is all what happened in 1993. Let me just make sure I go into my notes here. I don't want to make sure I'm not missing out anything. Movies were his passion, women were his inspiration, Agnora sweaters were his weakness. Ed Wood came out in 1994, directed by Tim Burton. The mostly true story of the legendary worst director of all time, who, with the helps of his strange friends, filmed countless B-rated movies without ever becoming famous or successful. And if you did not know, Ed Wood is a cross-dresser. He served in the Marine Corps during World War II. He was more afraid of his comrades finding his women's underwear underneath his uniform than he was of getting shot. He also wrote and directed the film Glenn or Glinda, based on his experience as a cross-dresser. Drink from me and live forever! Interview with a Vampire also came out in 1994, directed by Neil Jordan. A Vampire relates his epic life story of love, betrayal, loneliness, and dark hunger to an over-curious reporter. If you have seen Interview with a Vampire, I only seen it one time when I was a little bit younger, but there are definitely queer themes, androgyny, and, you know, blood! Now, this is an adaptation of the 1976 novel of the same name by Anne Rice, and Annie, whatever. This was a huge influence on the goth subculture when the book came out. The character Louis, played by Brad Pitt, and Lestat, played by Tom Cruise, were coded as a gay couple, especially when they turn a young girl, Claudia, played by Kristen Dunst, into a vampire, and they become her father figures. Later on, eventually in the 2020s, there is a television adaptation, which makes the queer relationship between the two characters more blatant rather than something that is coded. So enter 1994. We have had a lot of gay films, but there hasn't been a lot of lesbian films. So, Go Fish, directed by Rose Trochet, was released in 1994. Max, who is the co-writer, played by Guinevere Turner, is a young lesbian college student living in Chicago in a romantic dry spell. Her roommate Kia, played by T. Wendy McKillen, sets Max up with Ellie, played by V.S. Brody, an older woman that Max initially dismisses but ultimately falls for, until it is revealed that Ellie may already be committed. It is an integral film of the 90s American indie boom, and a staple of queer cinema for 3 decades. Rose Trochet's, who also directed Bedrooms and Hallways and the TV's The L Word, it is a refreshingly honest romantic comedy / drama. Go Fish is an admirably DIY portrait of the community and connection set in the bustling metropolis of the early 90s in Chicago. It is shot in 16mm black and white, and featuring a cast of largely unprofessional actors. Go Fish feels as indebted to the style and structure of documentary as other American indie narratives. Cinematography is proud to present Rose Trochet's now iconic portrait of queer identity. And again, we know that there has been a lot of gay films, you know, just from back in the day. A lot of gay films, but not a lot of lesbian films. Also, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, directed by Stephen Elliott. Bernadette, who is a drag queen about to relive her theatrical glory days with two young friends on one wild road trip. Billed for a gig in rural Alice Springs, which is smack dab in the middle of Australia, the trio hits the highway in a bus named Priscilla. This film proves sometimes all you need for a good time is the right friends, the right music, and of course, the right outfits. Terrence Stamp is in an acting turn hailed as one of the best performances of the year. This is also the year where Tom Hanks wins Best Actor for his role in Philadelphia, which was released the year prior. Now, this is the continuous ripple effect of straight actors who want to play gay roles for quote-unquote the award. Right? You're straight and you're playing a gay role, you are going to get an award, and if you do it right. And on television, now this was, you know, season 3 of The Real World, which was based in San Francisco. It is notably one of the most popular, probably one of the more popular Real World seasons, because it had Pedro Zamora, who is a Cuban activist who talks about AIDS and the importance of safe sex, and he himself is HIV positive. In this season of the Real World San Francisco, Puck goes by the name David Rainey, was evicted out of the house because of his homophobic remarks towards Pedro Zamora. These conflicts provided Entertainment Weekly and called it an emotional high point for the season, and it is credited that this is the Real World season. This is the season. It was ranked as number 7 on Times Magazine list as 32 most epic moments in reality TV history, and the season also featured the first ever same-sex commitment ceremony on TV between Pedro Zamora and his partner Sean Sasser. So this was, you know, we are paving the way not only cinematically but on television history. Right? Now, also in 1994, we have the booger known as Roseanne having a same-sex kiss on her show, Roseanne, infamously titled Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, this was all, you know, made for laughs, right? But of course was met with controversy, as it does. Of course, this was definitely a pop culture event that has happened. This is also the year where RuPaul gains mainstream fame and of course is unapologetically gay, unapologetically a drag queen, unapologetically, you know, just RuPaul being Ru, right? The Celluloid Closet came out in 1995, directed by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman. Exuberant, eye-opening movie that serves up a dazzling 100-year history of the role of gay men and lesbians have had on the silver screen. Film contains fabulous footage from 120 films showing the changing face of cinema sexuality, from cruel stereotypes to covert love to the activist triumphs of the 1990s. This is also based on a 1981 book about how queer characters have been portrayed in Hollywood. Enter 1995. We are continuing with, you know, more lesbian films that just continue to pave the way. The incredibly true adventures of two girls in love, directed by Maria Magnetti. Touching and poignant, this acclaimed coming-to-age comedy from new filmmaker Maria Magnetti is the story of two teenagers who unexpectedly experience the excitement, surprise, and romantic fantasy of first love. Brandy, played by Laurel Holloman, a rebellious working-class tomboy, meets a beautiful, well-to-do Eve, played by Nicole Parker, when she brings her Range Rover into the repair shop where Randy works after school. Immediately intrigued by each other, the two girls discover their subsequent friendship develops into an unlikely romance that impacts their lives in a way that they could have never imagined. Matter of fact, funny and sincere, Two Girls in Love is the perfect date movie for all. Also have, of course, the iconic To Wong Fu, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. Of course, this has appearances with Robin Williams. We have appearances by RuPaul herself. Now, en route from New York City to Hollywood for a drag queen beauty pageant, Noxima, Vida, and Chi-Chi are forced to take a unwelcome detour when their 1967 Cadillac convertible breaks down. Stranded in the tiny Midwestern town of Snydersville, the three tried to make their best in an unfortunate circumstance. When their glitz and glamour wake up the sleepy local citizens, the stage is set for an outrageously funny weekend. Three girls who just want to have fun in a hilarious comedy repairing broken hearts, broken dreams, and broken nails, starring Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, and John Leguizamo. I can't even pronounce it, motherfucker, and I'm fucking Hispanic. Leave me the fuck alone. So, of course, you know, with cameos with Thakar Channing, Blythe Danner, Robin Williams, RuPaul, and, of course, Julie Newmar herself. The marvelous mix of flamboyance, fun, and unrefined simpleness erupts into plenty of laughs. Now, again, we have Tom Hanks winning a award, right, for his role in Forrest Gump. Now, if we recall, Forrest Gump does have and does very lightly and tread on the AIDS epidemic because it happens around in the end of the movie, because if we recall, I guess the love interest had HIV, right? This film, although not queer in the sense of sexuality, but themes of bullying, trauma, neurodivergency, and surprise, surprise, AIDS. And not that none of these themes and topics are queer, but queer people, most of the time, have had first-hand experiences and relate to such themes. Things get a little wishy-washy, if you will, because this film was, I would say, a big celebration for conservative ideals, right? Meaning that Forrest Gump, who comes from a very small town, did what was expected of him by society, right? And, you know, becomes accomplished, right? An influential person, if you will. Now, Jenny, on the other hand, wanted to pursue the arts and social justice, right? And moved to the city and was punished for it and became a drug addict. And, you know, with the whole entire sharing needles, she became infected with the AIDS virus. Now, there are plenty of more video essays that go much more into depth of that, but I will just leave it at that. This is also the year where Selena gets shot, and this is also the year where Pedro Zamora dies due to HIV complications. Due to Pedro Zamora's death, which sent shockwaves through the world, because of course everyone was tuning in to watch The Real World. Remember, people don't really have phones, so their entertainment was television, watching TV, right? So of course, when people tune in to go watch The Real World San Francisco, and then later on, just a little bit before, I think a little bit before the debut, or a little bit after the season ended or wrapped up, people later on learned that Pedro Zamora actually died. A gathering of friends, a gift of love, a celebration of life. It's My Party came out in 1996, directed by Randall Klesler. Hope I'm saying that right. Nick, a gay HIV-positive architect, begins to display severe symptoms of AIDS and makes preparations to kill himself before he is unable to function normally. He arranges a party to reconnect and say goodbye to his closest friends and his confused parents. But when his ex-partner Brandon, a television director who left Nick when he was diagnosed with HIV, shows up, what was supposed to be a celebratory event becomes much more difficult for everyone. Now, the writer and the director of the movie was actually Stein's ex-lover, IRL. Not in the movie, but we're talking about IRL, because this is based on true events, and attended the farewell party. So we have 1996. We are starting off more with not only a lesbian film, but a black film, directed by Cheryl Dune, The Watermelon Woman. So Cheryl, a video store clerk, is an aspiring director whose interest in Forgotten Black Actresses leads her to investigate an obscure 1930 performer known as the Watermelon Woman, whose story proves to have surprising renaissance with Cheryl's own life as she navigates a new relationship with a white girlfriend, played by Guinevere Turner. The Wary Incisive debut feature by Cheryl Dunne gave cinema something bracingly new and groundbreaking, a vibrant representation of Black lesbian identity by a Black lesbian filmmaker. Dune stars as Cheryl, balancing breezy romantic comedy with a serious inquiry into the history of Black and queer women in Hollywood. The Watermelon Woman slightly rewrites long-standing constructions of race sexuality on screen, introducing an important voice in American cinema as the first Black lesbian feature to be theatrically released. Now, we also have more lesbianism here, right? So Bound, which is directed by the Wachowskis, infamously transgender directors who directed The Matrix, right? There's $2 million in his suitcase on a desk in an apartment in Chicago. Caesar launders money for the mob. Violet is an alluring mafia mall. Corky is an ex-con who just got out of the joint. What's the last thing that could come between a sleazy wise guy like Caesar and all that money? A couple of women with bodies to die for and brains that match. They become engulfed in physical attraction that spurs them to relieve Violet's boyfriend of the $2 million in cash. Corky and Violet are about to learn the meaning of trusting someone with your life. And Caesar, he's about to learn something about women. In the end, it all comes down to one question. Who can you trust? Also, The Birdcage was released. Now remember that Robin Williams has appeared in many queer films, both before and after, as I said, in Aladdin, right? Both before and after. He is a longtime ally. So The Birdcage, directed by Mike Nicholas, Armin and Albert, right, are a couple and have built the perfect life for themselves, tending to their successful and gaudy nightclub on the strip of Miami Beach. But their pastel tranquility is suddenly shaken by the arrival of Armand's son, who is getting married to the daughter of ultra-conservative Senator Keeley. What's more is the senator and his wife are on their way over for dinner and expecting to meet Mr. and Mrs. Family Values all the way from Palm Beach. Can Armin and Albert pull it off? It'll take a performance of extraordinary charisma to transform them into acceptable in-laws. In other words, to pull the chiffon over the Keeley's eyes. Lies and deception, it is all in the family when Robin Williams must convince conservative in-laws played by Jeannie Hackman and Diane West, that he's as upstanding and uptight as they are in this raucously funny comedy that'll leave you weak from laughter, co-starring Christine Baranski. The Birdcage is a comedy whose time has come that you'll watch time and time again. This is also kind of expanding upon the pansy stereotype. You know, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Armand, right? The Robin Williams' husband, who is a play of the pansy character, right? The pansy gay boy, right? Very soft, very feminine, very eccentric, right? So this kind of, although it is a comedy and everybody loves this movie, it does kind of play upon this pansy stereotype, which, I mean, give or take, could be, you know, good or bad, you know, depending on how you view the film. Now, further expanding upon The Birdcage, there is also the fact that, of course, whatever. I don't remember whose son is it, but Robin Williams' son, right, his biological son, is asking his two gay fathers to not only tone down the gayness, but not meet one of his other fathers, right? The much more flamboyant father, if you will. And that he wants them to meet his biological parents. Now, of course, this doesn't age well because, you know, what the fuck do you mean, bitch? You know what I mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Like, bitch, what? You know, of course, a son, right? The offspring, the son asking his gay father to miss out on meeting his fiance and her family just because they don't find the gay lifestyle acceptable is, of course, pretty hurtful when we think about it. And much so when the son asks Robin Williams to be something they aren't. Right? Which, as we know through history, the queer community has been forced to be in the closet, right? So essentially, the son is asking the father, hey, can you go back in the closet for me? You know, just right quickly. Right? You know what I mean? Like, this is, it doesn't age well, but of course the movie's fucking hilarious. And the movie did help normalize the gay lifestyle to mainstream audiences, especially a little bit more normalization of the flamboyant characters within the queer community, such as cross-dressing and drag and, you know, just the sexualization of it all, because, you know, I'm pretty sure that the maid was not only the maid for Robin Williams and his husband, because that definitely was, you know, I'm not trying to, but you know, I mean, you know what? You know. If you know, you know. So also, Get on the Bus, directed by Spike Lee, was also released. A group of different men traveling from Los Angeles to march in Washington, D.C. on their way to make friends, make enemies, and make history. Charles S. Dutton as the inspiring driver of the bus, Andre Braugher as a rage-filled actor, Isaiah Washington as the iconoclastic gay Republican, and the revered Ossie Davis as Jeremiah, the spiritual leader of the men, right? Was also released for people to consume. Now remember, you know, we don't have a lot of black gay films because a lot of gay films centered around the white experience, right? The white gay experience. Also, The English Patent wins Best Picture. In music, Celine Dion's Falling Into You wins Album of the Year. And the Defense of Marriage Act, also known as DOMA, federally defines marriage between a man and a woman. Ouch. Not really good. Romer versus Evan strikes down Colorado's Second Amendment. So we have, you know, when it comes to gay rights and gay liberation and queer liberation, it's always one step forward and like 3 steps back. You know what I mean? We have a win, but then we kind of get back a little bit. You know what I mean? So there is that. License to Kill came out in 1997, directed by Arthur Dong. A riveting journey into the minds of men whose contempt for homosexuals lead them to murder. Attacked in 1977 by gay bashers on the streets of San Francisco, filmmaker Arthur Dong confronts the murderers of gay men face to face in this film. He asks them directly, why did you do it? All Over Me, directed by Alex Sechel, is raw, real, and rockin'. This is the story of 2 girls struggle to find friendship and love in a world where kids don't count. Living on the edge in New York City, they discover there's only one thing they can rely on: each other. Starring Allison Folland and Tara Subkoff. And also, in 1997, Booty Call was released. Remember that, you know, we are having the conversation of in the 90s about safe sex and using condoms. Because in the 70s and 80s, we had the AIDS epidemic, right? People called it the gay plague. It is not the gay plague. It is a plague, period, right? It is affecting everybody. So everybody is having a conversation in somehow, some way, putting it in their media, putting it in books, putting it in movies, putting it on TV, that we need to have safe sex conversations or hint at safe sex. This is also the year where Titanic becomes the biggest movie of all time, right? In music, Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind wins Album of the Year, and this is also the year where Ellen DeGeneres comes out of the closet. Now, when Ellen DeGeneres came out of the closet, this was huge. This was a big thing, and it was met, of course, with lots of backlash coming out against the Ellen. Note that her show was also canceled a year after she came out of the closet. Yeah. I mean, no, now that we know the shit about Ellen now, you know. I'm not saying anything. Also, in 1997, we have G.I. Jane that came out, directed by none other than Ridley Scott and starring Demi Moore as Jordan O'Neill, or the G.I. Jane. Now, the US Navy begins a program that would allow for the eventual integration of women into its services. So, one of the plot points that is very telling of the times, right? Because, film is a reflection of politics, right? One of the plot points in the film that Jordan has to overcome is that she is being accused of being a lesbian. And just a few years prior, we know that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was signed into law. Okay, this doesn't even mean that, you couldn't talk about being gay, but you couldn't even be caught. You know what I mean? If they see you, they will snitch. So someone was trying to force her out of her, Navy SEAL training because, she was doing pretty well. Now, this was because only men were able to serve in the military, right? In any kind of branch of the military, if you will. And I guess they were using her as a pilot, right? Pilot as in the first, right? Not pilot as in a pilot driving a helicopter, or a plane. But she was pilot, and I guess, with the sexism and, themes of sexism and homophobia are rampant throughout this movie, right? Of course, not a queer film in itself, right? In terms of, lesbianism, but there are themes of it as much as Forrest Gump. 1998 comes rolling around, right? So, Billy's Hollywood Screen Kiss, directed by Tommy O'Havery, is about the road romance is anything but straight in this delightfully campy comedy that takes hilarious look at love in the 90s. Photographer Billy Collar has dreams of success in his viewfinder and no love in the picture. But all that changes when he meets and falls for handsome is he or isn't he coffee house waiter Gabriel and asks him to pose for a series of photos recreating great Hollywood screen kiss. See what happens in this warm and witty film. We also have Blind Faith, directed by Ernst Dickerson. More black gay films, right? And this one's a little bit more mainstream as well. So it is based in the Bronx, right? New York. In 1957, a white teenage lies dead. A black teenager stands accused of the crime with a written confession and 6 eyewitnesses. The prosecution wants the death penalty, and it seems certain that's the way they'll get. An honor student, the accused has never been a known troublemaker. His account of the night filled with discrepancies, but still pleads guilt. What secret will this murderer sacrifice his life to keep? This is also the year where Matthew Shepard's murder shocks the nation. On TV, Will and Grace premieres and becomes queer TV canon. Kind of expanding and then piggybacking on Ellen DeGeneres' show, Will and Grace was aired, right? And this was aired 2 years after Ellen DeGeneres came out of the closet, 1 year after her show got canceled. But you could say that Will and Grace ran so Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and Modern Family would be able to walk in its path. We also have in mainstream film, Shakespeare in Love wins Best Picture. In music, Lawrence Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill wins Album of the Year. And also, President Clinton issues executive order banning discrimination based on sexual orientation in federal hiring. A comedy of sexual disorientation. But I'm a Cheerleader came out in 1999, directed by Jamie Babbitt. Megan is an all-American girl, a cheerleader. She has a boyfriend, but Megan doesn't like kissing her boyfriend very much, and she's pretty touchy with her cheerleader friends. Her conservative parents worry that she must be a lesbian and send her off to a sexual redirection school where she must, with other lesbians and gay, learn how to be straight. This film infamously features RuPaul outside of drag as one of the coaches at this conversion therapy camp. Here we go with 1999. So in 1999, directed by Kimberly Pierce, Boys Don't Cry, a true story about hope, fear, and courage it takes to be yourself, inspired by the life of young Tina Brandon, who decides to live as a man named Brandon Tina until his secret is exposed with shocking consequences. Boys Don't Cry is the kind of movie that can reach and touch anyone. Hilary Swank and Chloe Sevigny, whatever, bitch, gives performance that'll burn in the memory. We also have Velvet Goldmine, directed by, you know, infamous director Todd Haynes. It's been 10 years since glam rock superstar Brian Slade faked his own death and vanished from the spotlight. Now, it's the job of an investigative reporter, Arthur Stewart, to locate this living legend and uncover the truth behind his disappearance. Through the course of Stewart's investigation, you're taken back into a vibrant music scene. Uncompromising look at the flamboyance and excess of its larger-than-life stars. Acclaimed by critics, Velvet Goldmine also earns an Award of Merit at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival, starring Ewan McGregor and Jonah Van Rice Myers. And this is the year with California. We love California, right? California becomes the first state to enact a domestic partnership law for same-sex couples. Now, I cannot wait to talk about this film because this is my first gay film that I watched when I was a a teenager, right? This was the first. I love this movie so much. Hands down, this movie is everything in my life. I love this movie so much. It has always been part of my top 5 because it's the first gay film that I watched and experienced, right? So Trick, a story about 2 guys trying to make it happen in the big city. Make it happen, if you catch my drift. Trick came out in 1999, directed by Jim Fall. Gabriel is a young, aspiring musical composer whose life seemed stuck in the first act. When his new musical number gets a critical reception, a theater colleague, Perry, tells Gabriel that he needs to get a life before he can write about one. So he heads straight to his local gay bar, and this film infamously has the one, the only Coco Peru, and features one of my favorite scenes of all time, the bathroom pissing scene, while fucking Coco Peru is fucking going on and on and on about the fucking Go-Go Boy. Oh my god, it's fucking amazing. I love this movie so much. On top of, you know, the strippers being hot and they're taking off their shirts and this is the movie for me. If you want to watch a gay movie, bitch, this is the one. This is the one. This is it. It's this one. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching my video on 90s queer cinematic history. I hope you all took something away from it. Y'all took some kind of, you know, at least some movies to watch, right? And just some history and general knowledge of the 90s and what that looked like for queer individuals, what that looked like for, you know, the bigger American audience and what they were consuming. So I wanted to make sure I kind of dabbled into a lot of those things. Of course, I didn't talk about, you know, every single queer movie that came out, but I wanted to make sure I get the big hits in there. And I wanted to make sure I got my favorite one in there. So, you know, I had to sneak that one in there, which is the very last one that I was just talking about. Trick. Again, if you want to watch any gay movie, or at least you want to start it off with something, Trick, it's perfect. It's like it's perfect. I love that movie. I remember the first time watching, I was like, this is hilarious. I love this movie. Also, shout out to Steven. Thank you so much for helping me do research. He essentially, you know, overlooked, like, he's like, you're missing this, you're missing that. You know, let's talk about this. I see that you dabbled in that. Let's dive into that just a little bit more. You know, he was overlooking and helping me out because this is a pretty big project. of just a video essay of just a really deep dive, like holy fucking shit. So shout out to Steven. I hope you all took some history, took some movies out of there, and that sense of being lost in case you don't know a lot about queer history and you're a queer individual and you just don't know our history. I hope you took some of that, because our history is being taken away from us. Our history is not being talked about. Our history is very, very important, much like Black history, much like Latin American history. This is history that is, you know, all these besides maybe white fucking history, right? All this shit's being taken away from us. And, you know, they're making us stupider and stupider as, you know, the years go by. And yes, it is boring. History is boring. Fucking US history is the most boring of all. Like, I do not like history, but when I went to college and they made us do an assignment, I was like, at first I was going to do Latin American cinematic history, but that one was already taken, and I was like, you know what, let the gay person do the gay thing. And I learned a lot of things, and I hope you guys are able to, you know, take something away and no longer feel lost. And in case you do, you know, I hope you find some type of comfort that, you know, you're not the only queer individual going through this. You know, you're not the only queer individual going through some type of questioning in life. You know, I think we all are, and it is a scary time for us. It is a scary time for trans people, especially. It is very, very scary. I don't know what the future is going to look like. I don't think any queer individual knows what the future is going to look like. The only thing I probably can say for certain is that history repeats itself, as we have seen, all right, from my past video essays. And, you know, Republicans always being in the fucking White House, there's going to be hopefully a switch, you know, and that's what this administration is trying us to not do, is to turn that switch on. They're trying to just cover it up with a painting and stuff, you know what I mean? I hope you guys know what I'm talking about. But if you like this video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. There will be more history, you know, videos. There will be more, you know, video essays on just queer topics in general. We got to make sure we know all of our history. And if we got to sit there and watch movies, let's watch movies. Sometimes we just have to, you know, tone down our constant need to be scrolling on social media a little bit. We just need to just put the phone down a bit and just watch a fucking good film. You know, sometimes some of these films are not even that good. Sometimes they're just trying to send a message. You know what I mean? And what is that message, right? And you know, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Anyways, yeah, I really don't know how to end a video like this. Ouch. This shit is heavy. I've been constantly like remaking this outro like fucking time and time and again. So yeah. Anyways. Bye.